As I said when we began the program, we initially planned that this Learnathon, which I think this is our second or third year of doing a pre-Purim Learnathon here at Bnei Torah, but we had initially planned that the learning should be for a Refuah Shlema for Paul. At the time, Pesach David ben Adel, and as everybody knows, that didn't turn out that way. So it ends up being instead Le'ilui Nishmaso, in memory of Pesach David ben Avram, somebody who I just enjoyed so much over the years. In every shul where we run a program, we have a different relationship, and there are different point people you interact with. And Bnei Torah is always more of a committee than one particular person. So we want to run a program, so generally it involves contacting Rav Asher Frankel and Andrea and also Paul and Alan and trying to and yes, and Layla also. Sorry, well, Layla doesn't happen, but. Yeah, inevitably, many of the tasks would be left to Paul, who was very glad. I remember at the Levaya thinking to myself, how many people had the same experience that I did with him. That no job was too big and no job was too small. Whatever it was, he would take care of it. And inevitably after the fact, you start to remember things and then wonder if you're remembering things, you're remembering what you think happened. But I seem to remember also walking in for the cheesecake party on Shavuos before the shiur that I would give on the second afternoon and seeing Paul in an apron serving that. It's not just me making that up. That was actually, okay, thank you. I'm glad for the confirmation. But really just a tremendous person, and made an impact on many, many people in his various roles. And so it's an honor for us to be able to do this in his memory. Yehi Zichro Baruch. The topic that I'm speaking about this morning is, we called it on the sheet, the Book of Achashverosh. Rabbi Bergman already alluded to the idea that the entire book may be viewed as the Book of Achashverosh, but I want to actually focus on Perek Tet, chapter 10 of Megillat Esther, which I didn't put on the sheet. I apologize, but you have Chumashim if anyone wants to. I'm going to read it out either way, but it's page 1261 if you're using the stone Chumash. It is in the back. Vayasem hamelach Achashverosh mas al haaretz v'iyei hayam. Achashverosh places a tax on the land and on islands of the sea, on the shores. Iyei hayam can be translated in different ways. V'chol ma'asei sakpo v'rasau parashas gidulas Mordechai asher gidulau hamelech, and all of the records of his might, meaning the might of Achashverosh, all the things he did, as well as an account of Gedulat Mordechai, the greatness of Mordechai, Asher Gedulau HaMelech, who was elevated by the king. Halohem Kesuvim al Sefer Divrei Amim L'Malchei Madayu Faras. They're recorded in the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. Ki Mordechai HaYehudi Mishnah LaMelech Achashverosh, because Mordechai, the Jew, was second in command to Achashverosh. V'gadol LaYehudim, great for the Jews. Ratsui L'Rov Echav, beloved by, I'm going to translate right now, many of his brethren. If you were to take a look on the sheet in the medrash that I brought you there in source number 1, it says perhaps it should be read as beloved by most of his brethren, because no one gets everybody. Fine. Doresh tov le'amo v'dover shalom l'chol zaro. He sought good for his nation. He spoke peace, dover shalom, they say here, concerned for the welfare. Okay, l'chol zaro, for all of his descendants. It's such a nice, innocent, quiet chapter. Right? After all the excitement of the Megillah, after all of the danger, and yes, the satire as well, but the wars of chapter 8, chapter 9, it's all gone. The threats are over. Esther is queen. Mordechai is the viceroy. We ride into the sunset. Chapter 10, we didn't make the chapter breaks. It's not, the chapter breaks come from the church, not from us. Nonetheless, you sort of ask yourself, what does this add? What is the message here? And the protagonist at this stage, the protagonist in chapter 10, I gave it away by titling the shiur, is really, to my mind, Achashverosh. It is. Verse 1. Achashverosh made a tax. Right? That's number one. When I learned Megillah in some years, I paused. Vayasam hamelech Achashverosh mas, to see if anyone will boo. You have to be a tuned-in crowd in order to boo at that point. But Achashverosh declares a tax over everybody. Second pasuk, he is great and he is mighty, and Mordechai is great because the king made him mighty too. And then the last pasuk, sure, Mordechai is great. He's Mishnel HaMelech Achashverosh. He's the viceroy of Achashverosh. Who did not appear at all in this chapter? Esther. Esther's not there. Mordechai is there as a function of the king. Haman is long gone. Right? We're done with Haman's at that stage. But what message are we supposed to see in concluding the Megillah with a description of the power of Achashverosh? Why would you do this? What would you say? Why conclude Megillat Esther with an ode to Achashverosh? You tell me. Yeah, you want to be able to publish this book. Right? It's a good idea, as a general principle, to try to get into the king's good graces. Gerald, that was what you were going to say? Right, so Gerald points out that this could be read as a reminder. Right? It could be that this is just sort of a word to our sponsor, or a word about our sponsor. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that it's a note that you shouldn't think that everything is fine. Achashverosh is still in charge. We're not, not everything is wonderful. You did hear from Rabbi Hachber now back in Israel at this stage in history and building the second Beis HaMikdash. But make no mistake, if you read Ezra and Nehemiah carefully, you realize the Beis HaMikdash was sort of the religious version of Scotia Bank Center, in the sense that it's the Persian Empire temple of the Jews. It's very much a Persian Empire building. You're under Achashverosh. Paul, you were going to say? There's always going to be an Achashverosh. Hark back to Rav Sammy's point. Good as well. I'd like to add something. I think these are all fine answers, and I think that there's truth to all of them, actually. But one more note here. The tax that Achashverosh places. What do you add to the story by mentioning that Achashverosh taxed everybody? So take a look on your sheet, please. Source number 2. Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra offers one suggestion. He says it fits into the context in chapter 10. We talk about Achashverosh. We talk about what Mordechai did for him. So I'm reading my English translation in the interest of time. You can see the original Hebrew as well. The text mentioned this to teach that Achashverosh, succeeded in all of his ways, including taxation. His might was visible. Why? Because Mordechai was his viceroy. Because Mordechai was working for him. Therefore, Achashverosh was able to collect the tax funds. That's Ibn Ezra. The Maharal, in his Or Chadash, which is a commentary to Megillas Esther, says no. It's actually back to chapter 9. The context is what came before this, which was the war against the enemies of the Jews. Maharal writes in number 3, because of the great deed Achashverosh, performed upon Haman, Achashverosh's throne was feared. The fact that he executed Haman, he executed his kids, and carried out this war against his supporters, or at least allowed it. So everyone said, you know what? I think we're going to pay the tax. I think we're good. What's that? You want to tax us more? Okay. It's an intimidation that's being spelled out here in the view of the Maharal in his commentary to Megillas Esther. However, the Maharal has another work called Ner Mitzvah, in which he talks about the 4 empires among whom the Jews have been exiled. In Yanei Arba Malchuyot. And he offers another explanation here. And it's a major insight at the end of Esther. It's going to fit in with Rav Sammy's shir from before as well, about what Achashverosh is like. And the Talmud said, it's describing or explaining a vision of Daniel. Daniel has a vision of 4 beasts, one of which is a bear. And the beasts are supposed to correspond to different empires. So the second one here is like a bear. I apologize right now for anyone who the Maharal is about to offend by quoting this Gemara. Rabbi Yosef taught the bear is a reference to the Persians, who eat and drink like a bear, who are fleshy like a bear, who are hairy like a bear, who are restless like a bear. I don't take any credit for it. This is the source. I gave a shir actually that related to this at some point in the past. But right now, that's not our topic. But he says the Persians, perpetually seek to swallow up. This is their trait. Thus it is written regarding this empire, Persia, in Esther, King Achashverosh placed a tax on the land and the islands of the sea. What does this come to teach? Saying the king placed a tax on the land. That's not news. Only it comes to say that this was the strength of Achashverosh, that he was lacking, and he perpetually sought to fill his desire with wealth. His strength, the salient characteristic of Achashverosh, is that he feels a need. There's something that he wants. Achashverosh always wants more. So at the end of the Megillah, whole story is over. Achashverosh wants more. That's the idea, which is remarkable because, of course, we know the Gemara says he reigns over everything, right? Hodu ve'Kush, however you read those lands. But that's the hunger of Achashverosh, and it's consistent with the start of the Megillah as well, in which Achashverosh is the dominant figure. He's sitting on the throne. He throws a party, and again, we find hunger. 6-month party, followed by a 7-day party, lots of drinking, which continues throughout the Megillah. The women are brought to the kingdom. Each of them comes to him for just one night, and then they go off to the harem. The message at the start of the Megillah is that Achashverosh is a hungry person, and the message at the end of the Megillah is that Achashverosh is a hungry person. What does that mean when you identify somebody as a hungry person? When you say somebody has to continually amass more, what's the message? Low self-esteem. It's a sickness. So, I brought you in source number 5, the Goldwater Rule. Because this is something that I think is important to keep in mind when we try to analyze people who appear in Tanakh. The Goldwater Rule, for those who are not familiar, is the informal name given to Section 7 in the American Psychiatric Association's Principles of Medical Ethics, which states that it is unethical for psychiatrists to give a professional opinion about public figures whom they have not examined in person and from whom they have not obtained consent to discuss their mental health in public statements. It is named after former U.S. Senator and 1964 presidential candidate Barry Goldwater. And for those who know his story, that's fine. Not a discussion for today either. I am not making any Achashverosh connections. That wasn't the point. My point is only that when we read about people in Tanakh, we tend to have a sense of familiarity as though we know them. And we start talking about them as though they have particular traits. And it's a bit of a dangerous game. Having said that, that's exactly what I'm about to do. So I'm apologizing in advance, but I think this is a time-honored tradition. Hunger can be an expression of bald appetite. It can be a physiological problem. But often physical appetites conceal an inner psychological neediness, and I think that may be the case here. He is hungry, and again, some of this goes back to what Rabbi Bergman had discussed in the first year. He's hungry for respect. And he's hungry for a feeling of security. Respect. Right? Go back to the beginning of the Megillah, and here in number 6, I just gave you references to the verses rather than bring them all on the sheet. Who in the world throws a 6-month party demanding that dignitaries from all over the empire show up? Right? When you learn Megillah Esther, you have to understand, why is this a 6-month party? So you can give different explanations, including because Achashverosh likes his parties. But odds are it's not that. It takes 6 months to get all the dignitaries from 127 lands coordinated to actually be there at different times. It's not as though they're all showing up. The entire Persian Empire, all the administration from the entire Persian Empire is going to be in the palace at the same time. The empire is just being run by what? Doesn't work that way. It's 6 months in order to match everybody's schedule so you can get the dignitaries from the entire empire to show up. Or consider this. Vashti refuses to show up. What does Achashverosh do when Vashti refuses to show up? No, before she's going to be executed, what does he do? Calls a meeting of whom? Sorry? You have to realize who it is that he assembles for this conversation. He calls the experts. That was his procedure. He went to the people who know the law. And then we list them all. The people who are ro'ei pnei hamelech, who see the king, hayoshvim rishona b'malchut, who sit first by the throne. He is assembling the best minds he has. The political geniuses. Why? Kedas malasos b'malcha Vashti. Because he wants to know what to do. Because my wife didn't listen to me. Really? Is this a matter for a political advisor? And then his verdict emerges, and he says, let me send a message to my entire kingdom. Right? You want to talk satire here. Right? The king who's really embarrassed that his wife wouldn't show up has now made it an empire-wide matter. He's told everybody that his wife wouldn't show up. It is so strange that the Gemara has to come out of this and say, in source number 7, that it was a political affair in the first place. He had married Belshazzar's daughter. His power only came through her. And therefore this really is a matter of the throne in some sense. Because it's just so hard to believe that somebody would be so hungry for respect that he's going to make it literally a federal matter when his wife didn't come out to the party. And then, you go further along, and Achashverosh has the contest to choose a queen. And who does he pick? The one who has no background. Right? The one who won't tell anybody where she is from. Right? Esther, of course. But why does he pick somebody who brings nothing to the table? Because he wants someone who brings nothing to the table. He wants somebody who he doesn't have to worry will not respect him. It plays out through the Megillah. It plays out, of course, with Haman. Haman's sales pitch. There's this nation that doesn't listen to you. Oh, off with their heads. Right? It's an immediate reaction for him. I brought you the Gemara in Megillah in source number 9. I'm skipping number 8, but you can take a look at it. But if you take a look at source number 9, at Haman's sales pitch, what does he say to him? He says, their law is different from that of any other nation. They don't eat from ours. They don't marry from ours. They don't marry theirs to us. They spend the entire year saying, today's Shabbos, today's Pesach, I can't go to work. They eat and drink and mock the throne. If a fly would fall into the cup of one of them, he would get rid of the fly and he would drink it. You try touching their wine and see if they drink. It's all about lack of respect for Achashverosh. And here's an interesting note that Maharal picks up on. Haman says, I'd like to pay you. I'd like to pay you for the destruction of the Jews. I'll fund it. What does Achashverosh say back? Hakesef natun lach. What does that mean? That's not quite what it says. Usually we translate it as, I'll fund it. Right? That's not what he said. The money is given to you. The money is given to you. What does that mean? Look what the Maharal says in source number 10. Because Achashverosh perpetually sought to swallow up, he said to Haman, the money is given to you. Not, I don't want your money. I accept it from you. I give it back to you. He didn't hold on to it. It would have been disgraceful for him to accept money and to give a nation for execution for the sake of money. If it looks like he's being bribed, that's no good. So he says, I'm taking your money and I generously give it to you to use. He's very hungry. He's not going to fund this thing himself. He's going to fund it with Haman's money. But he says, and now I give it back to you. He needs to be in the superior position. He needs to be in the position of power all the way through the Megillah. There's more you could do with this throughout Megillah Esther, but that's the respect. That's the respect front. He has to be in the power position. He has to be above, and he'll do anything to take down anybody who doesn't show him respect. And then there's also the security issue. Now, to be fair, he has reason to fear for his security, right? Early on in the Megillah, Bigtan and Teresh try to kill him. Let's not forget that. But perhaps the best example of his insecurity, meaning not insecurity psychologically, but feeling of lack of safety, is when he elevates Haman. Right? What was Haman before he was elevated? In the Megillah itself, Pshat, straight read. What was Haman before chapter 3 when he is elevated? Nothing. We had a list of the advisors, the key people. And it's true that there is one view in the Medrash that says that one of them, Memuchan, is also Haman. Right? What's fueling that Medrash? Can't possibly believe that Haman came out of nowhere. It can't be that he just came out of nowhere and suddenly he is the head. However, worth recognizing, other views in the Medrash say no, that Memuchan is actually Daniel. If you look at Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, Memuchan is not Haman at all. It's just the opposite. Haman is a political nobody. When Achashverosh is worried for his safety, because Bigtan and Teresh tried to kill him, He says, you know what? I am putting somebody in charge of the entire empire. He is going to report just to me. And you know, I'm going to take somebody who is a nobody. He has no network. Nobody for me to be afraid of. He reports to me. He owes everything to me. Wow, does this sound like anybody? Never mind. If you take a look at source number 12, you even have the line in the Gemara that says Haman was a barber. Right? No offense. I mean, I like barbers. But you take him and you make him really the person in charge of the greatest empire on earth. That's what you do. And we noted, of course, picking the unknown Esther as well. He wants somebody who has no allies, which is why he has a policy that nobody gets into the throne room uninvited. Right? Haman shows up and has to wait outside. Even Haman. Which is why also when Esther comes to him and says, I have a request, right? He says, up to 50%. Up to 50%. I retain voting rights. Does anybody seriously think that Esther was coming up to him and asking him for the entire empire? Does anyone seriously think that what was on her mind was, I want the entire empire? And Achashverosh needed to say to her, oh no, only up to half? Obviously not. Achashverosh knows she's not asking for the entire empire. This is Achashverosh's version of romance. This is Achashverosh on Valentine's Day. He says, honey, I adore you. I love you so much. I'll give you anything, up to 50% of what I have. Because he's so afraid. This is his nature. And Esther takes advantage of it, right? She invites Haman to a party, not once, but twice. So that Achashverosh will become jealous of Haman, and so that she can make the accusation and get Achashverosh to act immediately. And Haman won't have a chance to negotiate. Over and over and over again in the Megillah, Achashverosh displays this fear for his safety. Was Mordechai ever rewarded? You know that story, right? We don't need to go through that story in depth here. Rabbi Bergman already pointed out the business about the crown, and will he allow the crown or not allow the crown? The Gemara I brought you in number 14, Achashverosh comes back in after he heard the accusation against Haman and he walked out to his orchard to cool off. He walks back in and he sees Haman there, and Haman was knocked down by a malach onto the bed, playing again on that fear. That's what the Gemara is trying to highlight. What does Achashverosh do with all of this hunger? He's a man who is hungry for respect. He is a man who feels unsafe. So what he does is he schemes. He plots. He's forever looking for a way to feed his hunger, a way that he is going to be able to safeguard his position. That's why there's a classic Gemara, which I brought you here in source number 15. The classic one. Is Achashverosh a wise king or is Achashverosh a foolish king? If we had time, I would go through this in depth, but I'm going to just say it for you outside of the text. The Gemara, when it discusses this, first of all, you should know it also discusses this regarding Sancheiriv, the Assyrian king. Side note. But when the Gemara does this regarding Achashverosh, the way it does it is this. It asks the question, why did he have a party for all the leaders from his kingdom, and then afterwards a party for the locals? And the Gemara says, well, you could read it as really smart. The locals are his base. He's not worried about the base. He's going to first bring in everybody else, and then he'll cater to the base later. They can wait. That's one way to look at it. And so he's very sharp. The other way to look at it is, no, he's foolish. He should have taken care of the base first, and what he did was a tactical error by going instead for everybody else before he took care of his base. But either way within the Gemara, whether he's smart or whether he's foolish, whether he's clever or whether he's clueless, doesn't make a difference. The bottom line is, the Gemara is reading him as somebody who's thinking. He's plotting. Nothing he does is by accident. He may not be smart about it, but it's always with a tactic. And when he feels threatened, he lashes out. I brought you a quote from Dr. Shlomo Reimer in number 16 about the absence of emotional security always tends to spawn hate. The combination of emotional insecurity and hate invariably gives rise to a personality trait in which aggression is practiced for the express purpose of bolstering security. That's who he is. And the message, I think, of the book of Achashverosh, now we're talking not just chapter 10, but beginning to end, is that it provides a lesson for every generation about how we respond to fear and tension. The protagonist is Achashverosh. He experiences conflict, he experiences problems. Now, the truth is, every good story presents a hero. The hero has conflict, the hero has problems, and then they grow through that. They're supposed to have some kind of a growth experience that leads them to respond in a positive way. But not Achashverosh. He responds to the conflict and the problems by lashing out. Feeding himself, striking at his enemies, lowering this one, raising that one. Perek Yud, chapter 10, tells us that Achashverosh is the same person he was at the start. Even appointing Mordechai tells us that story. What credentials does Mordechai have, besides the fact that he saved him from Bigtan and Teresh? I saved the king's life, and I'm a relative of the queen he trusts. That makes me second in command in the kingdom? Who are you kidding? Achashverosh is the same person he was before. It's his hunger for security. And I think that's what the Megillah is telling us with the tax and the rest of the 10th Perek. At the end of the Megillah, Achashverosh has learned no lessons. He remains who he was all along. Somebody seeking validation, somebody taking from everybody in pursuit of satisfying his needs. Now, that's nice, but why do I need a story like that in Tanakh? Why is that in Tanakh? The answer, of course, is it's not about Achashverosh, it's about us and what we are supposed to take away from it. Because you contrast Achashverosh's arc with our arc. We also start the book with a lack of respect. Right? Denizens of the Persian Empire. We also start the book with a lack of security. Haman can do what he wants. We undergo conflict, we undergo problems, but in the conclusion of the book, we have become a new nation. Rabbim me'amei ha'aretz misyahadim, the nations feared us. They wanted to become us. Mordechai, Mishneh LaMelech. And why did we go one way while Achashverosh went the other way? Because what we did in the middle. Achashverosh responded to his fears and his appetites by grasping for control and taking for himself. How did Mordechai and Esther respond to their lack of security, lack of safety, to their hunger? What did they do? They turned to Hashem for support. Right? They acted selflessly. Esther allowed herself to be taken to the king against her better interests. Mordechai told Esther about the plot of Bigtan and Teresh to protect Achashverosh. They acted for others. The nation fasts for 3 days, an act of prayer to Hashem. Esther endangers herself going to the king. And this is highlighted at the end of the Megillah as well. Because Mordechai is described how? Doresh tov le'amo v'dover shalom l'chol zaro. He is looking out for others. He seeks not to take, but to give. And that to me is the message here. Achashverosh in Perek Yud, Achashverosh in chapter 10, is the same guy he was in the beginning. The same hungers, the same fears, and all he does is try to take for himself, and that's why he has a problem. Whereas the Jews in that position of hunger and fear look to act for others. They learn a lesson from it. They also appeal to Hashem. And the result is that they become something very different along the way. I think there's a lot to be said for that, more perhaps on another occasion. But for now, I also wish you a Freilich and Purim, Yehudim Haisa Ora, V'Simcha, V'Sason, V'Kar, King Tehillah.